time has come for you to write a melody. Did you recognize any of these situations? Or maybe even all of them? Maybe this video will help you. Hey everybody, Xander here. Welcome to Learning Music Skills, the place where I talk about all kinds of music topics for becoming a better songwriter, producer, and musician. Let's get creative. So how do you start writing a melody? Sometimes inspiration just seems to come out of thin air. Sometimes a melody can come to you while you're riding the bike or when you're improvising on your instrument. This is great when that happens, but you cannot just sit around and wait and hope that inspiration might strike again, right? So today's video is all about providing you with some logical steps in how to start writing a melody and how to overcome a writer's block for whenever you get stuck on a certain melody or when you don't have any inspiration. What methods are there for coming up with melodies? There is improvisation, borrowing notes from an underlying chord progression, using other songs or melodies from your favorite artists as a source of inspiration. We have logical thinking, and we have a combination of all four of them. Of course, there's more, but this should be enough for now. So I think the best approach is to take it step by step. And with every new step, we need to evaluate and rethink about how we want our melody to develop and if it's still going in the right direction. The easiest and most fail-proof way is to look at the chord progression. We do this because the chord progression already gives us some harmonic content and can guide us in our note choices. So here you see our chord progression. Let's first draw out all the notes that are represented in the chords so that we see with what kind of notes we are dealing with. And here you see all the notes from the chord progression translated to the melody line. Now that we have all these chord tones, we need to ask ourselves the first question. Do we want our melody to go up? Or do you want it to go down? Or maybe a combination? And what we're going to do is we're going to choose one of these notes per chord. And we're going to do this for every bar, and eventually we'll end up with a melody. In this case, I went for a melody that starts to climb up during the first round and then stays on a higher pitch than it started to hold the interest. So I went for a melody that tends to climb upwards. One thing that you need to keep in mind when writing a melody for an instrument or a vocalist is that you more or less need to know what the range is. And if this melody is going to be played in any electronic instrument or electronic sound, then you need to think about what register you want your melody to start in. Just a question on the side. Do you think it is good to start a melody all the way up in the high register? And when you think about it, do we have any room to develop after that? Now that we have our basic melody, let's see if we can make it a bit more interesting by adjusting the rhythm. So now comes the second question. What kind of rhythm do we want? Do we want it to be active with fast notes? Do we want it to be slower with long notes? Do we want to have a slow start and then a shorter ending? Or do we want it to start quickly and have longer notes towards the end? Or do we want a combination? We can change the rhythm by inserting rests, or making notes longer or shorter, or even possibly repeating them. So let's try to get going by changing the rhythm. My goal was to make the melody freer, less heavy, and make it more independent from the chord progression. Let's have a listen. You can already notice that the rhythmic activity is a lot higher in this second version. This is starting to feel more like a good melody, but there is still more room for improvement. This brings us to question or point number 3. How much tension do we want in our melody? The melody that we have so far is completely consonant, but music gains more momentum and color and interest when you add some dissonance, when you add some tension. Right now everything sounds fine because we are only using notes that are represented in the underlying chords. If you want to add more dissonance, you need to add more tones that are not part of the underlying chord. So let's see if we can add some more spice to our melody. And while we're adding these notes, we even might adjust the rhythm a little bit more, but we'll see later. I decided to start the piece consonant, so I'm starting on the chord tone C. But then in bar 2, you see I added a D, which is not part of the A minor chord. And also when you look at the 4th bar, I extended the E from the previous bar, and as you can see that E is not part of the G chord, so this is a dissonance as well. In the 2nd phrase, only in the 3rd bar I added the dissonant tone F. This tone connects the E and the G together. So this kind of a dissonance we call a passing note. We're almost finished, but I think the melody could use a little bit of refinement in some places. This brings us to point number 4. What kind of melodic span do you want your melody to have? So what do I mean with melodic span? Well, actually, it has to do with point number 1 as well. A melody develops and it goes up and down and it carries tension, but how we divide this tension is crucial. So when I look at the melody, I feel that it's peaking a bit too early in the 1st phrase. And also I feel that some things in the 2nd phrase are not 100%. So let's listen to some of the changes that I made. So as I said, I felt that the melody was peaking too soon. And the problem was the G note, because that's the highest note so far. So what I did was I lowered that note to B, and this gives our melody a little bit more time to develop. And this is exactly what I mean with your melodic span. How long does it take to develop? And how many phrases do you have in between? Are they separate phrases? Or are these phrases part of a bigger melody? Also, I wanted a little bit more liveliness, so I adjusted some of the rhythms. And in the 2nd bar of phrase 2, I tied the E to the 3rd bar, creating one long note. And what I wanted to mention is that later on in time, you can always revisit your melody and change some things here and there if you just still are not satisfied. It's very normal to come back to a certain melody and change things here and there. The last part is adding lyrics. If you're going to write your lyrics after you have written the melody, then it is important to find out what kind of character you feel that the melody and the song has. Because they have to match. Is it melancholic? Is it happy? Is it contemplative or energetic? This brings us to point number 5. What is the character of my melody? Unfortunately, I cannot dig into some lyric writing techniques in this video, but that's definitely on my to-do list. It is normal that once you have a lyric, you might need to adjust some of the timings, some of the rhythms, and maybe even some of the pitches to make everything work. Let's have a look and a listen at what I've written as a lyric. I've got I felt that this melody had a sense of urgency and was also leaning more towards a melody that desires something. So what I did was I wrote lyrics that more or less fit my previous structure, but of course, in order to fit all the words correctly, you need to rework your melody. I want to emphasize that there are so many different ways that you can write a melody and that you can start a melody. So by no means is this the only way. But the approach that I just showed you can be suitable for any style of music and any type of melody. You can apply this technique to your vocal melodies as well as your instrumental melodies. And you can use this technique when you're getting stuck, when you have no inspiration and you don't know what to do next. But the most important thing is for you to find your own unique voice, no pun intended, and every song and composition requires its own approach. I'm very curious to hear and see the results, or if you have any additional questions, so feel free to share them with us. And as always, if you have any topic requests, just drop them in the comment section below. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, and for now, see you next time.